Hello, everyone. Hello and good afternoon. I hope you can see me and hear me loud and clear. So just to check that I'm not speaking to myself alone in this room, can you give me a message in the chat box? A simple hi will do so that I know that you can hear me loud and clear. Hey, great. I've seen a lot of message. Okay, let's keep that coming. So allow me to introduce myself. I'm Aaron Saw, a fellow member of ACCA and currently the Head of Policy and Technical at ACCA Malaysia. So I may have met some of you at some student engagement sessions or maybe at ACCA events. So if you have seen me before, hello again. It's very nice to meet you. So welcome to today's session, Accountancy Careers in the 2020s. It's an exciting time indeed to be an accountant. As a budding or aspiring accountant, I understand if you have plenty of questions in mind about your future, such as where and how do you start to build a successful career? You may also wonder about the relevance of the accountancy profession, one which you spend 4 years or more to study and another several years to hone your skills before your competency is recognized. I certainly did that many years ago. So if I try to guess, I think you may also wonder about what kind of organizations you would want to work for. How do you get your dream job? How do you get people to like you? And what if you don't do a good job at work? Do you have those questions in mind? I'm sure there are more. So I recently had the privilege of speaking with 3 FCCAs. They are fellow members of ACCA with rich experience and operating in different roles in the industry. They are currently based in 3 different countries, in Malaysia, in Singapore, and Australia. I will be introducing them in a short while, so you know whom will be speaking with you today. And I was also informed that today we have students from other countries joining us. So pardon me if I don't pronounce it very well. Xin chào to those from Vietnam, and selamat datang from the rest, everyone from the rest of the region. Our speakers today has interesting stories about their career to share with you. And I personally have picked up at least 10 tips and practical advice from them. Now, you don't have to limit yourself to 10. You may take more because many of you are at the start of your career. Take as much knowledge and tips as you can and put them to good use, whichever is suitable for you. So at the end of the session, what you can do is tell me which one of these tips and practical advice from our guest speakers today is your favorite. And again, let me remind you that you don't have to limit yourself to 10. Meanwhile, I'll be here to answer your questions. So send me your questions in the chat box and remember to set your message to send to all panelists and attendees. That is so that everyone can see your questions, and when I reply to them, we will all see it too. If you enjoy support like today's session, as much as we enjoy supporting you and your ambition, please renew your student membership in my ACCA account. I will certainly want to meet you one day as a fellow member. Without further ado, let's begin the conversation with our guest speakers. So stay tuned to the screen as I will share the conversation with our guest speakers. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session. I'm very pleased to be facilitating today's conversation. This is part of ACCA Career Coaching webinar. And I would love to think that it's a special edition today as we are discussing accountancy careers in this coming decade, the decade of 2020s. perhaps wawasan 2020 is not what we have envisioned it to be, but it's still a very exciting decade. And joining me today is fellow members of ACCA. We have Jason Crimson, a Senior Director of Business Partnership in Kimberly-Clark. We have Mariam Reza, President, Intergenerational Consulting from Worcestershire, and Wilson Cole, the Group Treasurer in Grab. So three speakers from very dynamic career paths, and each one of us, yes, including myself, we were trained in accountancy, but we have taken a very interesting path to where we are today. So before we get to the panelists, I just like to set the scene for today's conversation. Starting off, what I'd like to say is the global economy is truly transforming, and how organizations compete and operate is now being reshaped by many trends that's happening around the world. And if you wonder, okay, some of these trends include globalization and protectionism, changing expectations of individuals such as you and I in the workplace, and also shifting social practices and values, be it in our daily lives or while at work. Also, we have new types and higher levels of connectivity, and we are not even using 5G at the moment. So with the current technology, we are already so connected, be it for services on a personal life level, communication with friends, or for business purpose. And another trend is the shifting demographics in the workplace. Now, previously, we may have 2 or 3 generations in an organization, but now it wouldn't be surprising if you meet 5 generations working together. So in the face of all this change, the accounting profession is truly evolving, even though we have to play a pivotal role in building and protecting businesses and organizations for the long term. Accountants are here to shape how organizations compete and operate, and we're doing that to meet stakeholders' demand, which is ever-changing. If you ask any one of the panelists, I think the demand has never stayed the same, be it year on year or even if they may change during that year. And we're doing all this so that we can create prosperity for our stakeholders, and we aim to do that for the long term. All right? So along with all this change, we cannot run away from saying this. Along with all this change came COVID-19, the pandemic. While it has brought a lot of disruption to business, from my observation, I also see COVID-19 being a catalyst. It has intensified or speed up the adoption of several transformations in organizations. One of which I find most apparent is the adoption of flexible work arrangement among organizations. The pandemic has given us an experience that flexible work arrangement is possible. So I've spoken about global trends changing or shaping the accountancy profession. Where are the career opportunities in this exciting profession? Well, ACCA's research, the accountancy careers in the 2020s, that's this coming decade, we anticipate opportunities in 5 career zones, and I will give you a brief description for each of them. Let's start off with the assurance advocate. So in this image, okay, what you will see is at the core is forming a sustainable organization, and the accountancy profession plays a very important role and in 5 career zones. Now, namely, they are the assurance advocate, the business transformer, the data navigator, the sustainability trailblazer and the digital playmaker. And to be able to do that, ACCA identifies 7 professional quotients that the future accountants need to be equipped with. So briefly, let me just tell you about these career zones, starting off with the assurance advocate. Now, you may think that isn't this the conventional audit and accounting work? While accountants still have to do accounting and some form of assurance work, the changing landscape means we get hold of information in more diverse form. We are getting hold of data, and we use this information to make decisions. You want to know, or you want to believe that this information is reliable, and that's where the accountancy profession lends our expertise. Next is the business transformer. This person plays a very important role in driving major change in organizations, be it in the finance function. Of course, if you're accountants, you're talking about the finance function, but also the entire operation in an organization. When we change, be it the input, the process, or the output, will involve the role of an accountant. Next one, the data navigator should not come as a surprise. As more organizations move towards using data to draw insights when they want to make decisions, right? So on top of relying on one's experience, now there are data to be able to guide decisions on where organization is heading, and with the use of emerging technology, this can be done at a much faster pace. So that brings in the digital playmaker. We will say this person is a sort of an evangelist, a technology evangelist who will drive the use of technology in organizations, in the finance function, whether it's from the recording of transactions or even making a transaction happen, to processing that data so that decisions can be made timely or quickly, and reporting what has happened so that we can even anticipate what actions we will take in the future using predictive and prescriptive analytics. Lastly is the sustainability trailblazer. Now, this is not only about the green movement or not. Where the sustainability trailblazer plays a role is in performance management, looking at the use of resources to ensure organizations operate on a very sustainable basis, and to be able to use insights to guide that decision so that the community is taken care of, the shareholders are taken care of, the employees are taken care of. So with these dynamics, are these opportunities or risks to today's accountants and aspiring accountants such as yourself? I guess this is the time for us to consult our panel in the upcoming conversation. So without further ado, let's start our conversation with today's panelists. And I would like to invite our panelists to perhaps briefly tell us about yourself, an introduction about yourself, and also about your current role.
Hi everyone, thanks Aaron for the short introduction about ACCA career zones. So my name is Wilson. I work at Grab at the moment, based in Singapore. I'm a Malaysian, by the way, so still a Malaysian. Very happy to see you all, and thanks for your time to listen into this conversation. Hope you find some value out of this. So very briefly, what I do at Grab, the official title is Group Treasurer. So think of it as below the CFO organization, there are a few areas of expertise. So you have the controllership, you have reporting team, sometimes you have shared service, internal audits, tax and treasury. Treasury is part of this tower of expertise within it. So what do I do usually? I manage financial risks across Grab, across the world. Manage cash, manage liquidity, ensure that cash goes to where they should be at the right time at the right price. So that's in the gist what I do day in day out. Because there are every decision that the board makes will involve certain kind of resources in the form of cash moving in or out of countries, in and out of legal entities. I also provide advice and counsel to the board, to the CFO on what decisions to take. Of course, with my accounting background, that has made my role much easier to do because there is this visibility and understanding of how numbers and data work in that sense. So, yep, that's a very brief nutshell.
Thank you, Wilson, for the brief introduction. Next up, I'd like to invite Jason.
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to connect and share and learn from each other here. Just a bit of background. I took up ACCA, after completing my SPM and LCCI. I never went to university. I did everything in Malaysia, and right after finishing my ACCA, I got straight into the workforce, working for a professional services firm in PwC in tax consulting for a couple of years. Then I moved on to IBM for where I spent about 10 years straddling areas like accounting, consolidation, reporting, project management, as well as various other special projects. And then subsequently, I moved to Kimberly-Clark, where I've already spent about 9 years plus right now, also kind of like running shared services, setting up shared services in Malaysia as well as Poland, and more recently leading a global restructuring program based out of the US, which is about $2 billion program. And then now I'm currently handling the business partnership role in Kimberly-Clark for GBS. Since April this year. So relatively new role, and a bit of a background about what that role does is basically two things. One is I'm in charge of developing solutions to enable the different functions in Kimberly-Clark to embrace global business services. So basically moving some of the work that they do in the current functions and business units into global business services within Kimberly-Clark. And the second thing that I do is basically driving the customer experience for the functions and business units that use the services from global business services. So that's the two things that I'm kind of driving for the company right now. Pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason, for the brief introduction. I may be jumping the gun a little bit, but since Jason has introduced, I would say, a very interesting role, can I follow up with a question now to ask Jason, is this a role, what you're doing, is this something that organization will usually hire an accountant to do?
Okay, I'm going to answer that question. It's a tricky question to answer, but yeah, the answer is two parts. One is no, if you are just starting in your career as an accountant. But yes, if over the years, you've accumulated different experiences in stakeholder management, in operations, in tactical and strategic planning, you would probably get that opportunity to do a role like this, right? So it really depends on the kind of experiences that you have. And I've just been very lucky that, throughout my 20 years of experiences, I've accumulated those elements, right, that has helped me become the right person for the job, for this role. And I also believe there's a little bit of personality that comes into it, because when you do customer experience, being an accountant and then trying to lead customer experience, I think it comes with a bit of the personality and bringing some of your core capabilities and strengths to the fore also. So I think you got to look at it holistically. So to answer your question again, Aaron, no, if you're probably starting your career, probably not. They would not choose an accountant because it's very hard to articulate and demonstrate that you can do the job, right? It's in beginning of your career. But over time, if you are focused in that area and you demonstrate those attributes, then I believe you can.
Yeah, so there's experience, skills, and personality, a great personality like Jason. Okay, so now allow me to invite Miriam to join the conversation. Miriam, briefly tell us about yourself and your current role.
Thanks for that, Aaron, and thank you, ACCA Malaysia, for having me as well. I work for a company called Wattleshire, based out of Australia, which is possibly why I have such a really strong light on my face, because it's already dinner time now, time to go to sleep already. So at Wattleshire, I am the president of Intergenerational Consulting. What that means, it's human capital consulting, so it's more like, I'd say like HR, but more around how do you strategize to maximize value out of your people, because your people have full potential to be the leaders of the future. I am an FCCA and an accountant. I come from an accounting background, but now I do more human capital work, because after my accounting background, I moved towards organizational psychology. And this is a really good webinar for you, because you can understand, and as Wilson already mentioned, and also Jason, you can start off with accounting, and that gives you a really good background to then branch out into so many different types of careers. And that's what we'll be talking about today. Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks, Maria, but I really want to follow up with this question. I heard HR, but you're an accountant. So why do you think you fit into this role?
Oh, that's because accountants can do everything. And what I mean by that is, for one thing, because we're awesome, but also because and Wilson touched on this really important point that I loved. He has the accounting skills to be able to inform boards. And I always describe it as the business and financial acumen to be able to lead businesses. So when you do ACCA, it's not an accounting profession only, but it teaches you business skills, leadership skills. It also teaches you, and if you go back down to the quotients that Aaron was talking about before, it talks about creativity around how to lead a business. So what's HR? It's about managing people. What's business? It's about managing people. How do you do anything today? How do you talk to your mom? How do you bring up your children? It's people. So even though you're an accountant and you think only numbers run the world, yes, because it's money and financial runs the world. But how do you get anything done? It's about your people skills as well. So my question to you, in this role, would you traditionally hire an accountant? If you think about it like that, no. But we are best equipped to do that because we have business acumen, financial acumen, and also the ability to be better interpersonal leaders that sit across the board to influence a helicopter view of how business runs.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you link accountants with creativity, because I think that's not who accountants are traditionally. And to take that back to Wilson, I'd like to circle back to Wilson now. I believe what he said about his role in the treasury, in the treasury function, there's no fixed step 1, step 2, step 3 to get cash or to spend it. So Wilson, can you tell us what makes you want to do this? What makes you get up every day, rush to office, or maybe you're working from home now, and to do what you're doing now?
Right. Thanks, Aaron. So a bit of a background. Pretty much like Jason, I actually did LCCI and ACCA directly because it's faster, it's quicker. I completed it in 2 years. It's the cheapest course I can find and the best quality education. So I didn't even go to university for that, and I started work at quite a young age in Malaysia, Ernst & Young. So started out as an auditor. At that point in time, if you look out, would I have said, I would be heading a treasury team? Definitely not. Would I have known where I'll be? Definitely not. So I think the focus is more on it's an education. So ACCA prepares you for the workforce, and over the years, the qualification has embraced technology, digital skills, and there's a lot of research done to prepare accountants well for the future. So in the future, I would see that we're not going to be bean counters. It's really up to us on how we upskill ourselves and how do we actually sell ourselves, how do we connect with people to explain what value we can bring to the organization. So very interestingly, within Treasury itself, when I worked in Hong Kong, my previous boss, who's a British, I thought he has either CFA or some very deep treasury certification, but no, he's an electrical engineer. And within my team, there were lawyers. There was one studying psychology. So there's this pot of people from all over the world doing treasury work, which is supposed to be quite specialized, and you need to understand how market works. how the bond and financial FX market works. But then that opened up my eyes to say that, actually the education is something that you need to equip yourself, one, as a starting point to get your first job. And then it's a lifelong journey. And as you journey across the different organizations, opportunities open up. You get to know new people, you get to know new industries, new companies, and you sort of pivot yourself and find what you really have passion to do. And of course, I'm interested in this role because one of the company, Grab, as you all know, is very heavy in Southeast Asia. There's a lot of helping the drivers, the merchants to earn a living across the Southeast Asian countries. And also it sort of deepens my skill as it prepares for more senior roles within an organization. So ACCA does open a lot of doors, and the challenge I will give to the audience here is, what do you make of it, after you pass the qualification? How do you fully monetize, or how do you fully make it work for you as you go along in your career?
Yeah, so the panelists has been giving challenges to the audience. Well, in fact, you can also ask them questions. So what you can do is type your question in the chat box. Along the way, I will pick up questions to ask panelists. So, if there's a burning question, there's something that you've always wanted to know, now is the chance. So I think it's time for us to get to know our participants as well, what's in their mind. So maybe, Michelle, do you want to bring up the poll? So that helps us to gauge what's in the mind of our participants, and we'll respond to that in the coming conversations. Right, so what you need to do is, you see the QR code, you can take out your smartphones, scan the QR code, and there's only one question, okay? Answer that question, and we will be discussing the results shortly. Michelle, can you also add in the URL for the questionnaire in the chat box, so those who cannot use a smartphone, they can also do it on their computers. Okay? So while we gather responses, I'd just like to follow up on the conversation earlier. As the longer we get into this conversation, the more common traits that I see between the speakers today. For one, of course, we are all ACCA members. And now I know that 3 of us started our career in a professional firm, and 2 of us actually started in our careers in the same firm. So which is which? I'm not going to tell you yet. And Miriam still hasn't told us much about her background, so that remains a mystery. Whether do you get a degree before your ACCA, or you went straight into ACCA? Maybe you want to tell us a bit about that.
Oh, that's interesting. I did my O-levels and my A-levels, so I did my London edXLs at that time. And then I moved to Singapore to study my CAT. So I was like a baby. I started off in CAT, and then I finished off with ACCA, then did the whole Oxford Brookes degree. And then my master's was the only academic qualification that I did. So it's more a lot of professional qualifications. So I have ACCA and CPA Australia, and the master's in Org Psych.
Wow, that's
But I started as a baby in CAT, yeah. Very proud of that part as well, given that CAT, as a very young person, the CAT, the Certified Accounting Technician course, really grounded me in the basics of accounting and everything that, business in general, commerce as well.
Great. No, well, I started off with a bachelor degree. So I did foundation studies, I got my bachelor's degree, and then I pursued ACCA. So from this conversation, you can already see 4 different routes in obtaining ACCA membership. If you cannot see how the diversity and how accessible ACCA is, you can already see it in today's panel conversation. So, Michelle, can you show us the poll results? And we'll get the conversation going. So this question, what we ask is, who has the biggest influence in your choice of career? And it looks like we have a group of independent folks, because the majority of them says it is themselves who has the biggest influence on their choice of career. That's followed by family members. I suppose that's mom or pop or an uncle who did really well as an accountant, and also lecturers and teachers. Well, I suppose that isn't surprising. Okay, now even with the response, the poll results refresh, we still see a consistent pattern. Now, besides these three, friends play an important role as well. So that's ranked as the fourth biggest influence. Now, what that tells us is, I hope you're mixing with the right crowd and friends who will tell you how great being an accountant is. So you will start your career path. You start your career in accountancy. Okay, now let's shift the conversation to our panelists. Let's start with maybe Miriam. Have you always been doing what you're doing now?
Oh, that's an interesting, very, very interesting question. Thanks for that, Aaron. I really take a lot of pride in my journey, because I go through these periods in my life every 7 years where I relook at what I've done and I try to become a better person by sometimes pivoting into something different. That keeps me on my toes, and it also enables me to look at what's working and what's not and progress into something different. So I started off in accounting in an internal audit. And to go back to the recent career report that ACCA released, as an accountant or an auditor, I was more in the assurance advocate aspect, where it was more technical skills, accountancy knowledge, and a little bit of perhaps creativity. But then I realized during a forensic audit that we had, it was about human psychology. It was about, because it's internal audit, everybody hates you. You're supposed to be paid by the company, but nobody likes you because you got to go ask for the documents. Please, please, please. You're investigating people of your own tribe, which is very hard. Then I realized, okay, it's about communication. It's about reaching out to people. It's about going to have a cup of tea with the people that you're investigating. And then I realized, okay, let's move into org psych. And that made me move towards organizational psychology, which then I did a lot of lecturing in that space. I did a lot of writing, a lot of research, and now I'm in the human capital space. So under the human capital space, I would now kind of say I'm more of a business transformer, where we work with a lot of clients around human capital strategy. What are the skills I'm talking about as an accountant I'm using now? I'm thinking about creativity, about emotional intelligence, and about experience as well. So from an accountant, I progressed into human capital and human psychology. And now COVID hit. What happened? A lot of my business was speaking, right? So face-to-face speaking, completely down, because nobody wants to do face-to-face training anymore. So how did I have to pivot again? I had to think about it very hard. And then now we're doing a task force. We're doing a big research with a community organization in Australia called the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence around the socio-economic impact of COVID on its people. So I started off in accounting, org psych, and now it's more socio-economic research. And that's all is enabled because of the foundations that I got as education, experience, and the ethics that I have as well. And all of this is what ACCA talks about so well.
Has there been anyone who has played a major role in influencing you? I'm
going to go with similar to the statistics, the poll that you ran, myself, because I hold myself to the highest standard. So every say 5 years, I'm already scratching my head thinking, I need to do better, I need to do better. But also the economy as well. So if you look at every 7 years, if I've pivoted, if you map that against economic cycles, you also realize your career is also pegged to the economic cycle of boom and bust. So sometimes if you lose your job, don't be sad, don't be upset. It could be economic considerations that are impacting your career. Sometimes you think, oh, I'm so bad, I'm not getting a job, I'm a student, I just came in. No, maybe the ground beneath you has shifted and it may not be within your control. So I'd say maybe myself, I hold myself to a very high standard, the economic considerations, but also I think the leaders around me as well, Aaron.
Yep. So, okay, I don't see any questions coming in yet. So maybe we'll move on with the conversation. And before we proceed, I'd just like a bit of reflection from Jason or maybe Wilson, what do you think about the poll earlier? Maybe tell us who has a big influence in your choice of career? Like Wilson, would you like to go first?
Okay, yeah, let me give it a shot. So I think for me, it's more of my passion for understanding businesses. Put it this way, when I was young, I was quite curious. So whatever things you see around you, whether it's a shop selling char kway teow or whether it's a supermarket selling products, you want to know why they are there, why they exist. They exist to serve a certain purpose, to provide certain goods or services that you require. So that's the thing for their rationale. And the roles then would be something that will pivot against serving those objectives. So when I get that realization, I sort of wanted to know, how do I understand more about how those businesses work? And you can only do that when you understand how they report numbers or how they actually present their financials. And hence that sort of stuck with me for a while, and I was looking through whether accountancy or whether I need to do treasury certification or even CFA, and CFA and ACCA came up as one of the easy choice for me. So yeah, it's more of a passion which I wanted to fulfill. To know more about how businesses work.
So in your role as group treasury, do you foresee this role becoming more important?
Short answer is yes, because treasury controls the movement of cash and financial risks of the company. So as long as you have businesses, there are risks to manage. But I would like to use a different way of answering that question. Roles are just roles. Roles, as I mentioned just now, they exist to serve a particular purpose or objective. And it is really down to the individual to make that role important or relevant. So putting a person into a role, and if the person doesn't show much impact or doesn't show much outcomes or deliverables that serves the company's purpose, then that role will be diminished. Likewise, if you put in someone to do a very general role, for example, admin manager or accountant, but if that person has the ability to present numbers to
Oh, Wilson, you've muted yourself.
Oh, okay. Where do you lose me?
Just a second.
Okay. That's interesting. I didn't press anything. Okay, so what I was saying is that as long as you can find a reason to justify the importance of the role, the impact you can create in the organization, I think that role will only become more and more important. And of course, you can notice that the way I answer the question is, it's not so much of the qualification, it's a stepping stone, but what you do with it, that really matters.
Yeah, thank you, Wilson. And speaking about roles, and I'd like to connect this to my earlier conversation with Jason before this session. We had a bit of a side chat, and after reading about what Jason does and having a side conversation with him, I made this comment: it's so difficult to put a title to what Jason does, right? So like you point out, a role is just one, but what do you do with it? The functions, it can be quite difficult to describe. So I guess that leads me to Jason, and I'd like to direct this question to him. I've heard this several times, even when I was much younger. People tell me, do what you love. So Jason, is that what you're doing now?
Well, the way I interpret a question like that is, if I did what I love, I wish I could do what I absolutely love, because I love to karaoke, but unfortunately, I'm not good enough for people to pay me to sing karaoke, right? So,
Okay.
so in the context of a professional career, I would say that the way I interpret whether I do what I love, it depends on whether I feel like that, whether I add value to that particular role, right? Whether I'm contributing in a meaningful way to that particular role or the job that I do. And, I think, again, I've been very, very lucky that throughout my whole career that I've always had an opportunity to do that. Beginning in the beginning of the career, maybe it's been a bit more prescribed to me, a bit more structured, and therefore you just do what you're told to do because that's kind of like the way the roles have been designed. Especially like if you work in a professional services firm, right? They have very standard protocols, and you just execute accordingly. But as you go through your stages in your career, what will happen is what I went through is I've identified areas where I could, leverage my skill set or leverage my personal attributes or my personal strengths to enable to provide a bit of a different color to how that particular role is being executed or being performed, right? And I think, this is something that you'll have to identify throughout your career, and I've had the chance where I had mentors or even bosses, right, who kind of like help me discover those kind of personal attributes, capabilities that help me, first of all, identify what they are, right? And then the second thing is, how do I leverage those attributes to enhance the outcomes of the work that I do, right? Giving it a different flavor, a different impact, right? So I would say that, when I say add value, there's two things. One is make sure that, I feel very excited if a role gives me a chance to leverage my full experience over the past 20 years, right? Skills and experiences. And then the second part is I can bring a piece of myself to that piece of work. That means I can put the Jason Crimson stamp on it, right? And say, oh yeah, this is a typical Jason Crimson thing, right? And some of it, I give you some examples. Like in some of my roles where I was given a project management responsibility, and if you ask 10 project managers to run a project, they've got their protocols, they've got their systems and their approaches, right? So you can go and treat it like a checklist. But in my personal situation, what I tend to do is, instead of just telling somebody to take action on those items that's on the task list, what I tend to do is I'll usually go and reach out to the stakeholders and say, hey, how do you feel about doing this task? Are there any challenges in accomplishing this task, right? And this is just the way I would have done it, right? And it for some reason it helps the task to be done in an easier way, or even the stakeholders feel like they're more comfortable to do it. Now, do you call it, is that unique to me? Maybe not unique just to myself, but, if you have that approach, then the outcomes could be different. And typically, if you engage stakeholders, with empathy and understanding, you tend to get a better outcome, right, and less pushback. So that's how it kind of like helps in my execution of what I do. But I always believe that when I can bring that personal attributes, personal strengths to the fore, then I feel very, accomplished, very satisfied, especially when the outcomes are positive, right? So I think, when you say, do I do what I love? I think right now I'm very, very lucky to be able to do it because I've got the job description, but I never rely on the job description. There's always added elements that you can bring to the table to really...
It's always changing. Your role is always changing.
Always changing, right? But I think it's what I said. You got to recognize identify what that special uniqueness that you bring to the table, right? Whether you're doing audit, whether you're doing tax, whether you're doing just general accounting, anything, treasury, you have a special element that you can bring to the table. You have to identify that early, and if you can't identify yourself, the best way to do it is ask for feedback. Ask your bosses, your peers, more seniors, say, hey, when you look at me, what's special about me in this role? they can help you identify your special skill set or your attribute that makes you make a difference in what you do. So that's what I would.
And what I've gathered from your sharing was do what you feel satisfied with, right? I think what you're doing is you find satisfaction in it and you find value. It helps someone. It solves a problem. That gives you satisfaction. And I guess that means I think each one of us will interpret that love quite on a very personal basis. Yeah, and a couple of questions came in, and I think it's also tied into this conversation. So Steve asked about gig workers, and I think it's relevant in the current landscape, and I'd like to tie it to another question about the current business environment where jobs is scarce, so maybe fresh graduates find it hard to get a job. And so what happens is some even fresh graduates result to working in the gig economy. So do you think, I'm asking this to our all panelists, like, do you think gig worker would play a more diverse and significant role in finance and accounting going forward?
I'll probably have a crack at it then, while the gentleman probably will back me up or contradict me even. It's really, really interesting. When you talk about the gig workers, you need to also be careful about what type of work of gig you do. So working as a gig worker as in accounting and finance is possible, given that there are a lot of now gig platforms that enable you to put your services, professional services, up online to get a contract or two. Is it going to fundamentally change the way we do business from a professional services setting? It might take some time for you to be able to call gig work your primary source of income. So to give you an example, you may not be able to live completely on a gig income right now, but it could supplement your income as a professional services person. The trend is moving towards a gig platform, but it will be a blended approach where you might have some gigs, but you also might have a full-time job that could be working on a flexible work arrangement where you can possibly be working from home. So gig is here to stay, yes. Is it to the level where you can live off of gig income only? We're still evolving. But yes, about supplementing your income would be able to, is still there. As a graduate, the best experience or best advice I can give you is use these gigs to collect it as a portfolio. So think about every engagement as a portfolio that adds to your repertoire of skills and experience. As a graduate, your core aim is to build your experience, and that comes through several gigs as much as you can.
Yeah, and I recall reading another research by ACCA where over 3,000 respondents say they would prefer to build a portfolio of experience compared to being a specialist, because they want diverse experience, they want to dabble in various roles. So maybe allow me to ask the question differently, right? Gentlemen, would you consider renting an accountant?
Sure.
Let me give this.
Yeah.
Jason.
Go ahead, Wilson.
I think it's already happening. There are CFOs that you can rent for those who don't really need to pay a CFO for like 12 months in a year. There are treasurers that you can rent. There are lawyers that you can rent. So I think my company Grab was built on this premise. There's always something you can. You don't have to own, and yet you can still get your job done. So you can still get to move from A to B. You can still get someone to review your financials and to sign off if required, or to give professional advice. So I think that will increase over time, the gig part. And I sort of echo what Maria mentioned as well. Usually when I look at CVs or those applicants who want to get a role, the very important question is, especially during this time of COVID, what do they do during times of lull? So do they waste their time, or do they actually use it to pick up something new? And it can not necessarily be something that is revenue generating. It can be something that is doing community service. It can be building schools somewhere. But what I'm looking for is, what have they learned and how have they grown from that experience? I think that's very important, because that sort of tells me a lot about the competency of the person, not so much on accountancy or treasury, but as a person and the character itself. The importance is placed on the individual rather than those job experiences.
Thanks, Wilson. So keep the questions coming. We'll be discussing them, right? And in fact, I have a good friend who is also a fellow member, does provide this service of, if you would like to call it, rent a CFO. So our participants today may be thinking, but he's got decades of experience, of course, rent a CFO. What about me? I'm just a fresh graduate. Well, would you believe that this rent a CFO also needs someone to support him in order to perform his role as a CFO, right? Even though it's on a rental basis. So that's where he works with, he has a team of people supporting him to perform that role. So that's where you can get in. And don't waste this time, don't waste this opportunity. It may not be the career, you may not think that this is what you aim for, but every experience counts towards building your career path. And in fact, one of our recent research also shows that the generation now is not looking for a ladder kind of career path, but it may look like, if you look at the pattern, it may look like a zigzag where you actually do different roles, gather the experience, and then you use that experience on another project, on another job. Okay, so let's move on with the conversation. I hope that is a useful information, a useful sharing by our panelists. So the next question, I'd like to direct this to Miriam. Even though I know, picking up from Jason's conversation where he said, if you look at this, it has very much a Jason Crimson signature to it. But I also know that there's a very strong Miriam Riza brand in the region. Okay, and Miriam happens to be ACCA's Regional Advocate Award winner. So Miriam, tell us about how does having a personal brand help accelerate your career?
Thanks for that, Aaron. And when Jason said that, Jason Crimson, I was like, wow, that's cool. That's really cool. And almost immediately, I wanted to get to know more about Jason. I wanted to know his story, what made him Jason Crimson, what made him become who he was. And that's what a brand speaks for you. And I'm going to take this slightly critically as well. Now, I can tell you right now, go ahead, get a brand, populate it with all sorts of news, but that's counterproductive as well. So when we talk about brand, we don't mean flooding social media with a million things. We're talking about being very strategic about the way you position yourself within the brand. So if you're a graduate and you're competing against Jason Crimson or, the big CFOs, how do you differentiate yourself? How do you set yourself apart? It's about going back to what Jason said around your special element. Identify what your special element is and then build on that to have a global voice or be known for that. So what is your personal brand? Being known for your special skill. So the importance of why that personal brand is important is because it enables you to leapfrog several layers and provide you access to otherwise closed doors. And in different cultures, whenever you work in different cultures, the level of access differs, right? So for example, you might, in some countries that are very highly nepotistic, where you need to know people to get hired, your personal brand would speak for you. In some countries, you need to have networks. How do you get networks if you're a nobody or if you just graduated? Again, your personal brand. So don't think I'm a graduate, I don't know anything. We all have our special skill. Remember what Jason spoke about? It's about leveraging off of that, building content around that space to then be known as that person so that when people can't see through all those access, you're able to cut through that access using your personal brand to be seen effectively in the both social media and offline world. But it's important, one other thing, Aaron, if you would allow me, is a lot of us younger individuals always think everything is about online world, online social media, so on and so forth. This engagement I got recently with a client, even though I have 30,000 followers on social media, that client had only one follower. So I didn't get the business because of an online presence. It was about offline relationships. So your personal brand should transcend online to offline connections as well. And that means networking, pressing the flesh, and meeting the people that matter.
Yep. Thank you, Miriam. And I guess it wouldn't be fair if we do not hear from Jason Crimson. Jason, tell us a bit about your brand and your experience in building it, and whether the digital space make any difference.
Yeah, I think, just to, pick up from what Miriam had shared about building the brand, I think, what I would advise folks who are kind of like relatively new in their careers is a couple of things. One is building the connection and, with people. Now, I'll give you an example, right? You can have the highest qualification. You may have your ACCA and whatnot, right? And you go into your workplace. And let's say here you are gung-ho and you want to build your career, right? And you want the visibility, you want all the good stuff. But then, right, as you're walking through the hallways of your office, like, once there's no COVID anymore, then when you're back in the office. But just imagine, right, if you're in the office and you see the general manager or the CFO of the company walking across you on the hallway, and you take a detour to avoid even saying hi. It's a very typical thing that we see among a lot of the more junior folks, because I think the less interaction you have, the better you feel. You feel safer. But that's not the kind of attributes that is going to help you in your career in building your personal brand, being visible and being engaged, right, with the leadership team. It starts from things like that, very simple, basic things like that. Learn how to engage, learn how to communicate, right? Don't just say hi and just walk away and say, how do you do? How's your day been? Is everything going okay? Be a human being. Engage, just talk, right? And like what Miriam said, press the flash, talk to them, engage with them, right? And I think we in many cases there's this culture of, especially in schools and college, sometimes the less you speak, the safer you are. Because you're afraid that when you say something, you sound stupid, or you ask a wrong question, or you press the wrong button, right? It's that kind of anxiety people have, right? And that's why they bring it to the work environment, and then that becomes a challenge, because then nobody hears you, nobody hears your voice, nobody knows that you even exist to some extent, right? And how do you then transcend with all your qualifications and your dreams and your passion, wanting to do what you love, and then you sabotage yourself by not engaging and not being visible and communicating, right? So that's something that I would encourage folks to do. And I think back to your question, like, what is my brand? How did I build my career? I think a lot of it is really taking a lot of chances like that, taking risk of engaging. For some reason, I recall that every time we have a roundtable town hall, I usually have a question to ask the leaders, because number one, curious. Number two, kind of like fill the emptiness, right? Sometimes it's just quiet. It's so quiet. There's nobody's asking questions. Then I just to ask the question, not because just want to be seen or anything like that, but you really genuinely, sincerely want to know certain things, because your leaders can give you perspective, right? So when you start doing things like this, people identify you, people recognize you, people find you visible, and then they kind of engage with you too. And then put two and two together. Eventually, opportunities come by your way too. I highly recommend that the ACCA graduates or relatively new to the career really focus on this, because this is not something that people will tell you to do. Even your friends will just tell you, shut up and keep quiet and sit down, don't ask so many questions. Seriously. But that's not the voice you need to listen to. You need to listen to the voice of you really putting yourself out there and being recognized for the great talent that you are. So I think that's very important for and that's something I'd like to share with everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. And actually, as you were sharing, I recall an earlier session where someone asked this question: is it okay for me to connect with or befriend someone from a senior position? So it links back to what you say. You meet a leader in the hallway, say hi to him. So maybe if I ask you this question, Jason, because you are of a senior position, would you accept a LinkedIn invitation from someone junior who just joined the company?
I think LinkedIn acceptance is not an issue at all, right? And I think it's from a senior point of view, it is senior leader point of view. I think usually we are, they will engage and do that. That's not a problem, right? But I think, I've been a junior person before in my company. I understand the anxiety and I understand that sometimes you feel very intimidated, right? Like, what if they look at me one kind and like, who do you think you are to send me a LinkedIn invite? But I think LinkedIn invite separate, keep it separate. The engagement, right? You just need to know what's normal, right? Engaging in small talk, engaging in asking them like, hey, what are the big things going on? You need to practice this. It doesn't come naturally, Aaron. I think it doesn't come naturally for a lot of people. So you kind of have to practice maybe in a safe environment, like round tables, coffee sessions, town halls. You can start practicing by asking the question, right? You will feel that there's a wall in front of you that stops you from doing it. But once you break that wall, guess what? It will become fun. It will become something that you're always thinking about. What's the question that you want to ask next, right? And then it becomes very, very, very easy over time. So I would say just start with the first one, and then you let the momentum take you forward.
Yeah, thank you. So the takeaway from this conversation, I would say is number one, be seen. Okay, get to know people. Even if they are from a more senior position. Of course, be polite, carry out a casual conversation, and practice. You will get better. So, okay.
Can I just add something very brief?
Sure, Wilson.
So, on top of the be seen and be ready part, I would also encourage, especially with ease of information at our fingertips at any point in time, do read up a lot of what's happening in the markets, what's happening in the country, what's happening in the company, in the industry, and try to get certain point of view so that as you speak to senior people, which you may only have like maybe 2 minutes, 30 seconds of an opportunity, you would say something that really makes you stand out, rather than very basic and shallow conversation. So I always try to make an effort to learn up and then find opportunities to talk to people and offer my point of view, my ideas, or get certain thoughts. So always be prepared.
Yeah, thank you, Wilson, for that. And I really want to thank you because that allows me to do an advertisement for ACCA. If you want to get insights about what's happening in the business community, in the profession, read the Professional Insights Report. Okay, you can get good views, good insights from it, and it will make you look smart. That's an added bonus. So carry out conversations and make you genuinely know about a certain topic. Really requires you to read up about it and also, of course, read the news and see what's happening around us. Okay, so let us move the conversation back to Wilson. Another often heard saying is that the only constant is change. So this is by an ancient Greek philosopher. I think his name is Heraclitus. So tell us, Wilson, in your role, right, that's always changing rapidly. Tell us about a skill that you have to relearn, maybe something recently, so that you are more effective at work.
Okay, so I think the more recent case will be the use of collaboration tools. So with COVID, you have no opportunity to be using boards to draw out charts and everything. So you really need to learn on a deeper scale how to use technology, how to use a laptop to connect with people, to push your ideas across and to garner feedback. Grab is a different company in a way because when I was in BP previously, I wasn't exposed to Google Docs, Google Sheet, Google Slides. Nothing is on the cloud. Everything is very secure and safe. So when I moved from BP to Grab, it was a very big change. I got to literally unlearn whatever I know about Microsoft Word and learn all about cloud technology, doing everything through laptops and mobile phones. nothing in a hard disk. So in a way, it's already ahead in the sense that we are a tech company, so it's very techy. And me being not techy myself personally in the past, it was quite a bit of a struggle when I first started out. But over time, people adapt. When we had this work from home thing, a lot of us were complaining, how are we going to do the things that we used to do in the past in the first 2 weeks? And then as we are forced to it, you sort of adapt. You adapt and you make the best of things. And now it's already 3 months, 4 months work from home, and God knows for how long more. So I think the adaptability is very important. You have to really know how to embrace change and see change as an opportunity to do things better, do things faster, make yourself shine better. And what I usually tell my team is, because we are no longer in the office, you can't go to the water cooler, show up in front of your boss and show that you're busy. You can't literally do that. You got to find other means through technology to do that. So yeah, always be creative with how you connect with people and how you present your work.
Yeah, I think that's really about continuous learning. And from my personal experience also, we use collaborative tools now in ACCA, and me and my team members, we can be working on the same Word document, editing. Previously, what we have to do your work, or you edit it, save, email it across, the other person opens it. But now it all happens really seamlessly.
Correct.
3 or 4 of us can be looking at the same document, and we just amend on the fly, making it really, really efficient. And another thing, when we roll out Teams, my first reaction was, don't we have Skype for Business? Why do we want to move to Teams? That hesitation I felt is natural. But now, after using Teams, I'll be asking myself, why do I even want to use Skype anymore? Look, it's a progression, and I can see Jason smiling away as I was sharing his experience. Anything you want to add in, Jason?
I think the virtual tools are definitely something that's very front and center nowadays. And across the board, right? Not just for those who are new in their careers, but everybody's learning at the same time. And it's amazing how the more kind of folks who've been around, they kind of have to relearn a lot of new things too. So that's a change that's going on. Now, what I would share is, it's something that's a bit not really front and center in our curriculum in ACCA, but I would say that something that I had to relearn was, it's probably just a chapter in one of the management subjects a long time ago when I took ACCA, but very recently, change management has become a very, very important element of capability and skill set that we need to have, especially if you think about it in the lens of a business transformer, right? But the ACCA report. I think, it's easy to say, hey, we need to transform things, change things, put in new tools, new systems, change the process. But actually, the change management aspect is something that you can, as an accountant, you can bring to the table, right? And people might be a bit surprised that you actually bring it to the table, because usually you expect the HR person or the org development person to deal with stuff like that. But if you can bring in with the change management aspect to a particular project or particular program that you're driving, I think you bring a different flavor, right? Skill sets, understanding stakeholders and stuff like that. And that's something that I had to do just 2 years ago, right? As I was running a project in Poland, I kind of I made a decision to go and certify myself on change management so that, I could be, could learn all the tools, learn all the techniques, and approach so that I can apply it in my particular program to a better outcome. And I think that is also a skill set that you can apply in any situation, not just my boss asked me, why do you need change management? We got change managers who can do that for you. I said, but the thing is, I felt that change management was something that I could use not only for my current projects, my current role, but also in life in general, right? In how you engage with people, how you get buy-in from people in anything that you do, right? Including family to some extent. So I think, it was a nice
advice there, Jason. Right?
Yeah, it's a nice relearning of a skill set that was only on a couple of chapters in a textbook long time ago, right? So it's very valuable.
Yeah, thank you. And on that note, I also know that Jason has been practicing flexible work arrangement or remote working, and this boils well with our recent survey in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we see that more than 70% of organizations in Malaysia say they have adopted flexible work arrangement, and there are indications that even remote work arrangement or remote working will be adopted more widely in Malaysia as well as in several markets around the world. So do you foresee this new norm being adopted more widely here in Malaysia?
I definitely believe so. I think all evidence is pointing towards that direction. But what I would say is some companies are more equipped to deal with that, and some are not. So there's a change management that needs to happen from the top in terms of what management decides for their respective companies. But I would say I think that the trend is definitely going to change, where there's going to be a higher percentage of work from home. Some roles may not ever be work from home because they just physically cannot do it, which I think is common sense. But there's something else that I think might happen is that it's not just a binary decision whether work from home or work from office, but even what office means could be different, because nowadays, generally speaking, you would say a lot of organizations have their offices in centralized offices in particular locations. But what might actually happen is almost like a hybrid approach where you could have satellite offices in certain suburbs within a city to allow employees who need to kind of like come to office once in a while to kind of like leverage that satellite office instead of everybody coming into a central office location. So that could also happen as options start being considered for the workforce for each company. It'd be different for each company, of course, but I think that's something that could evolve, because you kind of like want to give employees an option whether to work from home, whether to work in a satellite office which is close to their home, while being able to congregate with other colleagues, or go to the mothership, right, which is the main office. So it depends on the kind of model that they want to operate in. But I definitely believe that's going to change and be the new norm for the future.
Yeah, and I'd like to shift the conversation to Wilson, and I think you also practice flexible work arrangements. But tell us a little bit about how do you work with someone who just joined the organization?
Someone who just joined. Actually, before this call, I had a call with someone from Indonesia. So he joined about 3 months back, and he has never been to the Indonesia office. So he has not met his staff physically, his line manager physically. So he just started work, and it's all laptops and stuff. And I think by and large, productivity is there. He's still delivering what he needs to deliver, and it's for a good purpose. It's to ensure business continuity and health of the employees. So, to your question, how do new joiners come in? I guess it's a situation that we are all in, and we can't avoid it. There's a bigger purpose to serve. Hence, it's working fine, and people are looking forward to going back to work whenever it comes. Now, on this question as well, the other perspective is companies are also looking at optimizing costs. So this COVID situation has sort of brought up certain attributes. So there is this bright light about, hey, do we need so much office space? At the end of the day, without COVID, you wouldn't be in that situation to assess. But being forced into COVID, they now, I think a lot of senior people are now looking at, do we really need 100% or 120%? Why can't we do it 70 or even 50%? Use home for some of it, and then the balance, let's use co-working space. As long as it works out economically. So there is also the cost element, the welfare of the employees as well. And of course, the underlying principle is there shouldn't be any impact on productivity, on deliverables that the roles need to deliver.
Okay, thank you, Wilson and Jason, for that comment. So a question came in and asking our panelists to share one challenge that you faced throughout your career, and what sort of advice would you give to prepare or to overcome that challenge? So, okay, maybe I'll have Miriam take this question, give the gentleman a rest.
Thanks for that, Aaron, and great question as well. Great question as well. I think I'm gonna be a bit different here and say perhaps not learning languages soon enough. So English is my first language, and that's the only language I can fluently speak. And I think that has been a big inhibitor in my career, because I have not been able to while I have worked in other markets, I've lived in 5 different countries, I haven't been able to fully immerse myself in the culture of the company and the country that I lived in. And so therefore, if you are or expect to have a global career, or at least have an added value in even your country that you are in, perhaps arming yourself with a different language would assist you to be able to understand the pulse behind people, not just negotiations, but understand what they think, because language is an indicator of how they think, how they work, and what they feel like as well.
Yeah, thank you, Miriam. And any one of the gentlemen to jump in?
Yeah, Aaron, I think. Oh, go ahead, Wilson.
Jason, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I would say, in terms of challenges, and it's something that, is very close to my heart in terms of the challenges that I'm sharing. Number one is, I think communication is something that we take for granted. Ability to communicate is something we take for granted. So I would say that it doesn't matter where you are in your career. I apply this to myself also. You always have to improve how you communicate to get the message across, right? And it means different things to different people, but at the very core level, it'll be making sure that when you do presentations, you're practiced enough to present very fluently, very easily, very confidently. I think that's something that a lot of people find as challenging, but it's something that you should start early in developing that capability, because you will find at some point in your career, you will find that that's the thing that's going to kind of cause you to stumble, right? So that's something to look at. I would say even if it's just English, right? And I know, Mariam, we talk about a different language. That's a bonus, right? But even if it's English, not all of us are fully competent in fluent English, right? And depending on the companies you work for, if English is the main business language, I highly recommend that you really up the game in your capability, your vocabulary, the way you articulate yourself, right? And even practice like how you have teleconferences with people from different countries, different regions. You got to get in that zone of being able to articulate very clearly, because if you don't, then people think you don't have a voice, people think you don't have an opinion. You can only communicate through email and written form, and you can't have that discourse or that engagement with people. It's very important to be able to influence others, right, through your verbal communication in English, as well as in any presentations or telecon or anything like that. I think that's something that you may think doing what you're doing in college, or maybe in some assignments that you had is enough. It's not, right? This is one of my development items even today, right? It doesn't matter how experienced you are, you still need to develop, because as you develop your career, the people that you present to and communicate to are also different, right? So you kind of always have to up the game, and this is one of my advice to you. The other thing is learning how to accept feedback. This is something that if you haven't started your work career yet, it's something that becomes a surprise suddenly, right? During performance evaluation, or even suddenly somebody saying, actually, you're doing terrible in your job, or I don't like what you're doing. If you need to learn how to accept that feedback. So I recommend that as you do anything in your career, always proactively ask for feedback instead of just waiting for feedback to come to you. Don't operate on if I don't hear anything, it's okay, right? No news is good news. That's not the way to do it, right? Ask. Once you do a presentation, ask your boss, how did that go? Is there anything I can improve? Be proactive about it. There is no downside to it. The upside is you will learn, you'll get constructive feedback, and you can grow, right? So those are the two things I would say that Afina, I think this will help you maybe mitigate some of the challenges if you proactively manage these two items.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. So great tip from Miriam and Jason. One is pick up a language. From Jason is communication. Actually, I thought there's three: communication, up your game, and ask for feedback. So Wilson, you also wanted to say something. Can I have you to jump in quickly?
Sure. I mean, this is quite important for people who start out. I think it's quite similar to what Jason mentioned. I think you need to build the skills of speaking up, having a point of view. A lot of times when I speak to accountants, when I ask them, do you have any questions? They're very shy. They don't want to say anything. And I ask, why don't you just ask a question? Just practice it. I'm harmless, right? And they just say, accountants are like that. We are very inward looking. Now, honestly, I'm an introvert myself. So I hate public speaking. I'm actually scared of public speaking. But like what Jason mentioned, this is something that will be a stumbling block as you grow in your career, and opportunities usually go to those who are typically visible. There is no running away from that. And you just have to learn how to pick up those skills. There are a lot of resources online, TED Talks. You can even offer opportunities for yourself to present to other people, your friends. Find opportunities to learn these public speaking skills. It's really, really important. And of course, once you get around the courage to do so, then the content will come in. The content, the character to support that conversation, so that when people hear you speak, they know that you carry weight and you have a voice and you are. And it's very worthwhile spending that time listening to you. So get through at least the getting out there and speak more often first. Listen, learn from professionals if you can. I'm learning myself. That is always my weak point. Coming from Malaysia personally, I think the school system there doesn't encourage public speaking, and it's still so today.
Yeah, so ask questions, ask for help. One tip from me personally is I would say that there are a lot of questions that you will face in your career, and one tip I will give is connection. Build your connection. We cannot know everything. We will not know everything, but knowing whom to ask and knowing a friend who knows about the thing that you want to find out, that is super important, right? Whether it is about something that you're going to work on or something you just need to know, build your connection as early as possible. So on that note about connection, I'm going to ask Miriam this question. Have you had a mentor throughout your career, Miriam, and what do you find most rewarding in having one?
I think based on listening to the panel that we have today, I think the importance of a mentor is no more clearer. I mean, we're listening to what you say, Aaron, and also Jason and Wilson. I'm constantly inspired by the work that you've done, and I also want to better myself. To answer your question, have I had a mentor in my career? I had a really good one in the initial stage of my career, and then throughout my life, I've had career mentors as well. But mentorship, you can take it different ways as well. You can have a formalized structure of a mentor, or you can also gain inspirations from the people around you. And that's what I meant by just listening to Jason and Wilson and you talk. I've learned so much, and they are now my mentors in this short period. For example, when Wilson was talking about how he judges people's response to periods of lull, or when he touched on, providing extra reading on information so that you can talk to somebody of senior leadership, that's an inspiration to me, and I become better for it. When Jason was talking about special skills and how communication is important, I'm better for it. So mentorship, you can have a formal mentor, but if you don't have that, draw inspirations from the people around you.
Yeah, thank you. And looking at the chat box, I just realized I actually missed one question. Thanks, Miriam, for answering it in the chat box. So, okay, I've got one eye on the time, and I know we are the session is about to end. So let me ask each panelist to sum up sum up this session by giving one advice And a lot of our participants today would most likely be preparing their CV or anticipating the first job. So let me ask it in this way. If I want to be like you, what should I be thinking about when I build my CV?
Let me do a quick start.
Okay.
So it depends on who you're sending to, but I always believe in putting effort. So if you are sending CV to company A, you have to customize your CV in a way that you know what company A does, you know what the role does, and how it fits into the vision and mission of the company, and why you believe that you are the best person given your skill sets, your experience. It can be very little, but you can find definitely some experiences while you're in college, while you're in school, that can relate to that role. So what pisses me off is when I receive very standard templates of CVs, which I believe they send to company A to Z, exactly the same thing. That's effortless, no effort at all. I really look for people who put in effort, who do research, and who come to me as someone who is different from others. So find that difference, and how you can create that difference is really what you should be looking for.
Thank you, Wilson. Can we move to Miriam?
Okay, I'm going to do something different around how do you build your career. Don't have a career. Don't have a CV. Don't rely on a document to speak for yourself. Relationships, building, pressing the flesh, being known for your own individual thoughts. As Wilson said, have your own individual ideas from the readings that you've done. So yes, have a CV, because that's a static way of speaking to a company, but have your social media presence that is forever fluid, forever changing. So what your CV should be is, yes, that old document that you have, but your online presence, your relationships, the people that you meet, the challenges that you face, and that will all together become that CV or that persona that speaks for you when you're looking for a job.
Thank you, Miriam. And Jason, can we hear from you?
Yeah, sure. And I think what Wilson and Miriam shares are very valid. And for the majority of folks who typically still get a lot of comfort from having a CV written up, right, Miriam? So for those who get a lot of comfort in that, or rather they are applying to companies that still follow that traditional need of having a CV, there's one main thing I'd like to share with you, is that your CV needs to show the headline impact of what you do. Now, the thing is this, I understand most of you may not have started work yet, right? So think about it. If, let's say, you were in college or university, or let's say you were the club president of the chess club, for example, right? Let's use that as an example. Don't just say, I was the president of the chess club. Don't just stop there. That's kind of like just stating what you do, right? But you got to articulate the impact of what you did. I was the president of the chess club. Membership chess club increased by 25% during my leadership. That's the impact, right? Fees collected for the chess club increased by 30% during my leadership. That's some of those examples of how you can articulate the impact of what you've done, and not just state, cookie cutter what your role was, right? It's not enough, because what I believe is, when you write those kind of impacts in your CV, it becomes a trigger for your interviewer or the selector to ask you a follow-up question about it, and then you get to tell the story of how you did it. That's the way. Everything you put in a CV is a story. Actually, it's a starting of a story, and be prepared to tell that story during the interview once you get that call for the interview, right? So I think a lot of people kind of like just put I did this role. It's so like, you look at it, so like you see 100 CVs, they all look the same, and it becomes, meaningless. But when you start looking at the headline impact, then people say, oh, this person knows the value, his or her value in doing that role, and understands the impact that he or her had in that role. And that's how you catch people's attention, right? So that's, to me, the big item that I want to share. Some of the small items is like, make sure you have a professional email address. right? Don't have one of those, very fun sounding kiddie cartoony email addresses, right? Which is not really your name, right? You use like, handsomeboy321@gmail.com. Don't do that. You're sabotaging yourself, right? And I know sometimes it might feel uncool to just put your name, right, and make it professional. But you know what? Those things add up, and you are trying to paint give an impression, a professional impression to your future employers. So I highly recommend that you think through about things like that in order to give you the best chance to secure a career of your dreams.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. In fact, as I was listening to you, I find that Jason actually gave bonus tip, because what he said is not only applicable for your CV, you can even use it in your performance appraisal, right? When you start your career, don't just state what you have done, always task and impact. It comes as a pair. So thank you, Jason, for that wonderful tip. And so I guess we've come to the end of the session. I've run out of time, and all that remains for me to do is to thank my panelists, starting with Jason, Miriam, and Wilson. I think we've had a great session. It's always fun to talk to fellow members and to learn from each other. So join me in I know they may not be able to hear you, but join me in giving them a round of applause. And I would like to hand over the virtual floor to Michelle to give you some messages and to close the event. Over to you, Michelle. Hello, and welcome back. Can I see, is everyone still around, or am I the only one here? Just give me some message in the chat box. Yes, that's great. Okay, people are still around. So what are your favorite tips or practical career advice that you take away from this session? Let me know in the chat box. And I hope that has been a very useful session for you. It has certainly been helpful and useful for me when I first spoke to the FCCAs, and I took some notes and shared them on LinkedIn, so my family and friends and also people within my network can also learn from the session, even though they were not here to watch it. So thank you very much for attending today's session. That's all the time we have. And again, well, let's say if you have signed up for the session Advanced Taxation Singapore variant, it's happening later at 6 p.m. Okay, it's happening at 6 p.m. So please share tips and career advice that you have learned today with your friends and family. There have been a lot of questions earlier, and I did my best. I think I did my best in addressing them. So you may want to spend some time looking at the response or click on the links so that you have access to the myriad of information and resources available. So for those who are looking for employment, there's a global employability webinar that will be taking place at 3 p.m. our time in Malaysia and Singapore. So you can join this webinar to hear our panel discuss and share insights about how you can make the most of your ACCA qualification and gain practical experience. I will share the link to the webinar in a while. So lastly, all that's left for me to say is to wish you, if you are taking September exam, if you're taking exam in September, I would like to wish you all the best. Okay, please stay safe, and I wish you the best of luck in achieving your ACCA membership. See you in future ACCA events as a fellow member. Goodbye.
Hi, Erin. Thank you so much for the wonderful session today that we have for all our students. And to all of you, thank you for your participation, and we hope to see you again tomorrow and for next week's sessions as well. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.